And I'll bring it up and talk about how I did it, because AI, just as a refresher, AI only knows how to press buttons. That's what I'm going with so far. I want to take that to its logical conclusion. You know, we might change it, but it's really nice to have AI only know how to press buttons. So getting the Quora AI to manipulate its button so that you get the blade missile coming out, it knows how to release the blade missile. If the blade missile hits something and goes away, you know, okay, well, hang on, that thing's gone. It's no good anymore. That was a lot of our kind of challenge from Friday. And what we did on Friday, it worked. But even while I was doing it, I'm like, oh, this is going to be a pain to maintain. This is going to be too hard. Doing anything besides the Quora, any other fancy stuff, and you've seen some of the crazy ships I've done, or maybe you haven't, but I have done some crazy ship prototypes. There's going to need to be a lot of bespoke AI work, and I can't imagine doing it in the structure I created. You know, I'm only criticizing myself here. So to recap, the structure that we had, and I'll show you in script, but I want to show you the diagram because we had it. The idea is a ship. I'm pointing. Actually, let me make a new. If I add a new layer, then I can draw all over this. Where's my color picker? Color picker. All right. How about that nice purple? That seems nice. So a ship is made up of lots of parts, right? The ship has a weapon here. So this weapon is kind of the thing Fred's AI uses that says, hey, here's the characteristics of my weapon. Here's how fast it travels. Here's what it can hit. Here's the lifespan of my missile. Then there's the whole AI part. The AI part is the thing that tries to understand, well, hang on, should I be firing my weapon? Should I be navigating? Where should I navigate to? And Fred kind of gives me both pieces of information and I can decide. So if I can hit a shot, line up a shot, hit it. Then there's the nav object. The nav object is also kind of part of the AI concept. You know, every ship flying around has a nav object. It describes a thing that another ship might want to hit, another ship might want to avoid, depending on what it is. Now that's a lot of Fred stuff, and I'm not dealing as much with that. And then finally, we have the actual ship's weapon. So when you're a human player, you're really only dealing with the actual ship's weapon. None of these AI components matter to you. You don't care about it. You're a human. You press the weapon, or you press a button, and that tells the weapon to fire. So what I'm dealing with, or the challenge is, how do I get all of this stuff over here happening above the weapon to make a good decision that it can tell the AI, hey, time to press the button now. So the metaphor I had that evolved on, hey, someone wants scratches. The metaphor that evolved on Friday was, well, I set it up kind of like a conga line, and I can go over the conga line. But the conga line is, well, the AI here is the first participant, and it says, hey, you have a weapon, you know, you could fire it right now. Then the ship's weapon, or the sort of AI, I guess, things have changed so much, so it's hard to remember. But the idea would be the sort of ship weapon says, okay, I'm the next one in line. Maybe I can fire if I can. Now, if the Quora blade is out, it says, no, I can't, so I ignore that. And then lastly, there's sort of another component which is not represented here in the diagram, unfortunately, which is the button that controls the weapon itself. So the idea would be there's sort of a chain of ignorance, and the conga line is, well, I'm just an AI, you know, I'm just a navigation tool. I just tell the ship how to aim and fire. I tell this weapon, you know, you could fire right now if you wanted to, and I'm gonna assume you can. The weapon could come along and say, yo, I'm reloading. I have a blade out. I can't fire at all, and I'm going to reject that information. Then it wouldn't tell the next member in the conga line what to do. And so everybody's just kind of looking over their shoulder for instructions and saying, hey, what should I do? Should I do anything? You want me to do something? Then they look ahead and they pass the message along, and the person ahead would say, I don't want to do that, and kind of discard that information. So we had this sort of one-way chain of decisions. And not only was the implementation of it kind of a nightmare, but the biggest problem was, and I'm actually going to make a new drawing for us here. The biggest problem was in the fact that, well, sometimes if your weapon's offline, like let's say you don't have enough energy to hit a shot, why would you sit around trying to hit a shot if the weapon isn't even going to fire? That just made no sense to me. And I knew, getting ready to line up a shot when you did have energy, I could see how some of that stuff would make sense, but we're going to have very different ships that are going to want to do different things. So let me go back here. We'll make a new, how do I do that? I don't use this thing enough. Let's make a new drawing here. And so let me just diagram the way it used to work, and I'll just diagram the way it works now, and then we can even walk through the script. And this is all just for your edification and trying to catch you up to speed a little before I actually do some work. So the way it worked before was we had over here this AI, I'll just call it the navigator. And the navigator knew about weapons, and it knew about things, and it said, hey, you, weapon, you could fire. So the weapon said, oh, if I can fire, I better tell someone about that. It told this sort of AI weapon, I don't even remember the old naming conventions, but it told the AI weapon, hey, you know what? The ship is telling you could hit your shot. I want to tell you that you can hit your shot. And the AI weapon would tell the button with some, trickery that you can fire. Now the buttons could be different, right? So the button for the Urquan is just, I call it continuous. So hold the button down. The button for the Korra is, I have a new word for it, but it was press and hold. I mean, I still use that word, but there's an even more basic version of that. So the idea would be you had this whole chain of things coming down. The AI navigator talks to the weapon, talks to the AI weapon, talks to the button. And I had to break stuff up into all these little pieces just to get a reasonable flow of execution. And it really only went in one direction. It was kind of hard to keep track of the order because I'll show you the script. But on Friday, I went through this whole pain of like, oh, if a blade hits something, then I kind of need to reset the conga line and tell everybody their information's invalid. But I'm at the end of the chain. And so the way I do that, I had to make a whole mechanism for it. And it was awful. So that is the old way. Just for your FYI, I'll leave it up there. So that's the old way. Whoop, let's make the new way. And the new way is the weapon tells the AI navigator that it could fire. So weapons are just sitting around saying, you could, and not only that, they have granularity. So they can say, you can fire me. So if I could hit a shot, I can fire, but they also say you can aim me. That's really important because if you think about being out of energy, that might be, I mean, a ship might want to be ready to aim, but you could also imagine a threshold like take the fried missile on the Korra. That thing uses a ton of energy. Why would the Korra try to aim a fried? I mean, how do you aim a fried? But think about it as getting ready to use a fried. Why would a Korra try to be ready to use a fried if it's not going to regenerate its energy for like another 2 seconds? So the weapon tells the AI navigator the sort of state of it, and it goes first. This order is really important, right? Because everybody's making decisions based on the information provided to them. The AI navigator then says, do I have any weapons that I can aim? If I can, aim them. If I can't, don't do anything. Ignore those weapons. But more importantly also, do I have any weapons that could be fired? And the AI navigator either will, try to fire or aim. It'll navigate the ship in a proper way. But then the AI navigator says, okay, wait a minute. If I can fire a weapon, then it's the one that says, I almost don't want to, this isn't even its own thing. It just says it relates back to the weapon. So I'm going to draw a little arrow. I don't know how to express this without making the diagram busy. It says, okay, weapon, I have decided not only are you telling me you can fire, but I'm in a good position to hit a shot. The ship is angled correctly, right? So it says, hey, weapon, fire. Then there's sort of a somewhere later after this very important decision has been made, we have the notion of that AI weapon. Here it is. And the cool part, although I don't want to, this diagram is going to get messy if I try to describe it, this AI weapon is actually just the weapon. Okay, so I have all these components and everything's kind of broken up into pieces. If you saw it on Friday, it was painful. I just had to like daisy chain all these things together. But now I've consolidated all the logic to one place. And then if I want to expand on it, I'll show you how this works like in the engine too. And then I can do it all in one place, which is really nice. So the weapon says, you could fire me. The AI navigator says, I'm going to fire you, relates it back to the weapon, and then the weapon decides what it means to be told by the AI navigator to fire. Eventually, down here, we get to our button. And our button got a lot simpler. We used to have tons and tons of logic in the button. Now the button logic, you'll see, is really simple. So at the end, if the weapon has been told by the navigator you can fire, then it decides, well, hang on, I'm a Korra, well, the Korra blade has its own thing I'll walk through. But, hang on, I only am getting told to fire when I've told you I could be fired. And so there's this handshake between them that works out a lot better. And then the AI weapon, which is really a part of the I should just call this AI weapon. I was trying to make the diagram not awful. Then the AI weapon says, okay, well, here's what it means when I'm told to fire. And they move along, and the button is just sort of listening, saying, should I be doing anything? But it's up to the AI weapon to decide what button presses to tell the button to do. And that's one of the key elements of making this a